Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Melissa Urich, the Wetlands Coordinator of the Upper Susquehanna Coalition, and it's my pleasure to introduce our session this morning. Watershed Wednesdays are hosted by the Upper Susquehanna Coalition and the Otsego County Conservation Association, and are scheduled for each Wednesday now through November 20th. The sessions are recorded and can be accessed both on the USC website and YouTube page. To get things started, our presenter today is Krista Spohr. Krista is an environmental program specialist for the Bureau of Ecosystem Health within the Division of Fish and Wildlife for New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Krista is honored to be doing the important work of educating the citizens of New York about its vital ecosystems, freshwater wetlands, and how DEC regulates them. We would like to ask everyone to hold your questions to the end of Krista's presentation, at which time you could raise your hand or enter them into the chat. All right, take it away, Krista. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Krista Spohr. I am the outreach coordinator here at DEC for the freshwater wetlands regulation changes. And let me just move my little window. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about watersheds and the freshwater wetlands proposed regulation changes. So in the regulations, so part 663 of 6 NYCC or CRR is what handles the permit side of it. Part 664, that's mapping and classification, and that is the part that we propose to do a repeal and replace. And then part 665 is the section that deals with local government implementation and land use. So the sections of the proposed regulations are right here. And I'm going to share this presentation with Melissa when I'm done so you guys can all have it because there is a lot of information. But just so you have a little background or context where things are if you're looking into this further. And regulations, they're so boring as they're written, and it's, all lawyer talk. So I can understand frustrations when trying to understand these regulations. And I have my information at the end of the slideshow. So when you hit a wall of frustration of trying to understand, I am more than happy to help. Okay, why is this not going? Ooh, there we go. So just the summary of the key changes. In order to make jurisdictional determinations, we are looking at a transition from going from regulatory maps to informational maps. The regulatory maps are far, far outdated, and the inconsistencies of them, just to give you a little context of why we went regulatory maps to no maps, there is a lot of inconsistencies with the maps. They were done, the program began in 1975. In my previous presentation, if you want to find out more about this, it's on our website, the presentation and slides to show all of this. But basically, because the maps were so inaccurate, we were missing out on about 1 million wetlands in New York, 1 million acres of wetlands in New York State that are jurisdictional, that we should be able to regulate, but because they weren't on the maps, we were not meeting our statute of regulating wetlands, 12.4 acres and above. So that is one of the main reasons we had to get rid of these regulatory maps. So then the acreage threshold, I had just touched upon it. In order for a wetland to be regulated in New York State, it has to be 12.4 acres or greater. We kept that threshold for these regulation changes until 2028. In 2028, that threshold drops down to 7.4 acres. And then the third key change is UI criteria. So that's wetlands of unusual importance. And wetlands of unusual importance, there is no size threshold. It can be as small as a wetland if it's deemed it has one of 11 criteria, and it's really 10 because 2 of them are the same. But again, it's that legal jargon. So going over that wetlands of unusual importance, this is what it says in the law. Unusual importance shall mean a freshwater wetland, regardless of size, that possesses one or more of the following characteristics as determined by the department pursuant to the regulations. So these are the characteristics. Located, and that first one, located within a watershed with significant flooding. And we'll go over what that means and how we got to that. Located within or adjacent to an urban area, according to the US Census Bureau. It contains a rare plant species. It contains habitat for essential behavior of endangered, threatened species of concern or species of greatest conservation need. It is classified by the department as a Class 1 wetland. It was previously classified and mapped by the department as a wetland of unusual local importance. It is a vernal pool known to be productive for amphibian breeding. It is located within a FEMA designated floodway. It was previously mapped by the department on or before 12/31/2024. And it is, if you take a look at number 6 and number 9, they are basically the same thing. So this is why I say it's more like 10 criteria, not 11 criteria. It is a wetland of local or regional significance. It is of significant importance to protecting the state's water quality. Now you'll see there's ones that are in blue and ones that are in black. So the ones that are in blue, there was a lot of room for us to try to narrow it down and explain exactly, well, what does that mean? The black ones are very explicit in the statute, and there's no room for discrepancy. So clearly located within or adjacent to an urban area, according to the US Census Bureau. That's dry cut, black and white. And so these blue ones, we had to put our thinking caps on and do a lot of work on how exactly are we going to regulate these. And we really, tried to take a balanced approach to saving the environment, but also balancing the need for development. So let's go. And if you want to learn about any of the other ones, we're just talking about the first one today. But if you want to learn about any of the other ones, it is on our website, and I can send that out to you. Oh, there's the first one that we'll be talking about. So we looked at the hydrologic unit code, the HUC, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. The HUC is a sequence of numbers or letters that identifies a hydrological unit or feature. HUCs are unique to each hydrologic unit and consists of 2 to 12 digits. So the United States Geological Survey created the HUC. It's a hierarchical land area classification system based on surface hydrologic features. The USGS uses a nationwide system to delineate watersheds, which I'm sure you all know. So just taking a look at how large a HUC 12 is, it's the smallest. Kind of counterintuitive. The 2 is the largest. So when we're looking at, okay, what's a watershed with significant flooding? Well, first, it has to be a HUC 12 watershed, and then with 3 of the following criteria. So it has to have impervious surface that is greater than 2%. It has to have a water storage area that's less than 5%. So like lakes, ponds, wetlands, reservoirs, and it has to be within 4 kilometers of an urban area. So this was our way of looking at runoff, water holding capacity, and human risk. So we got the percentages from, we looked at EPA's watershed index online, and this allowed us to come up with these numbers. So if you look at the map of what all three of these criteria boil down to, this is where these watersheds of unusual importance will lie on the landscape. So getting into the permitting side of it. Okay, so there's this criteria, this UI criteria, unusual importance of having watersheds in the landscape. So what does that mean for projects that are happening now, or perhaps happening or in the works of beginning to happen? So DEC did, so we did 2 rounds of public comment, and the first is called an advance notice of public rulemaking that we did back in January, January 3rd till about February 20th was that one. So from that first round of public comment, we kind of shored up, okay, well, what does this mean about projects in the pipeline? So projects meeting the following criteria prior to January 1st, 2025 will be allowed to continue without any change in Article 24 jurisdiction for the following specified terms. I don't know why sometimes my thing doesn't work. Okay, so projects with mapped state regulated wetlands. If these conditions are met before 2025, if DEC issued a freshwater wetlands permit or DEC notice of complete freshwater wetlands permit application, then it doesn't matter if the project is major or minor. The new regulations won't apply until the permit expires. And so then projects without map state regulated wetlands. So the condition to be met before 2025 is if there is a final environmental impact statement or a negative declaration for a type 1 action or a site plan approved by municipalities. So for the scope of the project, if it's a major project, the new regulations won't apply for 3.5 years. If it's a minor project, then it's 2 years. So that was like a quick, I left a lot of time for questions because I know there's a lot of questions. And unfortunately, I was just telling Melissa in the beginning of the, before we started, is that just the way that it's happening, we are creating the SOPs, we are creating the procedures on how this will all be regulated. First, the first step was to get the regulations adopted. And so we wanted to make sure there was 2 rounds of public comment to show everybody, okay, this is how we are thinking of doing this. So yeah, with that being said, I will open it up to questions. And hopefully there is a lot still. So the SOPs, maybe this will answer some questions ahead of time. They're working on the SOPs now. We will post those on the website as soon as we have them. Of course, we're shooting for November, and we have the comment period just ended on September 20th. We have about 4,000 comments we are going through. So it's, and then the other layer of it is that Cornell, we have an MOU with Cornell University there who's creating the mapping. So the remote jurisdiction will all be done through this mapping that Cornell is creating. And so that they are still working on. We have not gotten a final product from that as well. So as soon we're hoping that's going to get up December. But yeah, so maybe that answered some questions ahead of time, but go ahead, and if you have questions, you can raise your hand, pop in the chat.
Well, thanks, Krista. Yeah, that was a super quick overview. And that's really interesting about Cornell creating the mapping. So we don't have a timeline on when that's going to be done, just December.
They have till the end of the year. So December.
And for some other big mapping projects like that we've been part of with Chesapeake Bay program, they often send around the products for comments and suggestions kind of before they enter the final stage. Is DEC planning on doing that at all?
Not with the mapping and the SOPs. So all the suggestions are from what we've promulgated on how we are creating these, but not the SOPs and the maps.
Oh, we've got a question from Amy Daly. All right. Do jurisdictions have to declare wetland as wetland of unusual importance for it to be regulated?
If it is a wetland smaller than 12.4 acres. So the process, because now when you have a wetland in question, the process is to reach out to your region, and then the region will give you a jurisdictional determination. So now, because it will be all remote, then it's shifting from the region to central office. So central office, there's 3 new biologists, ecologists that were hired to do this remote jurisdictional determination. There's going to be a form to fill out online, and that form will go to them, and then you will receive, we have 90 days to let you know whether or not your parcel that you're looking at is jurisdictional. The 90 days is what the legislator gave us, but we're shooting for efficiency so that it can be a lot shorter than that. I hope that answered your question.
Will there be a lot of interpretation with that, or is it just going to be it's in the mapped area, so yes, it's regulated?
There is an appeal process, so that if you don't agree that your parcel is jurisdictional, then the first step would be to have a meeting. And oh, I see that. Sorry, I just saw the comment and I got distracted. So the first step would be to have a meeting on the parcel to determine if we're all on the same page, because sometimes getting boots on the ground on the landscape is different. But yes, so kind of like if central office gives you a notification that this parcel is a wetland, then that's like the jurisdictional determination. But there are ways to appeal it, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, and now I hope I answered that question. And then I will shift gears. Hi, Carol, to your question. We did exchange emails about finding out how exactly smaller lakes will be affected. So the topic of smaller lakes, for those of you that don't know, it's in our wetland regulations that how we determine what is a wetland is by vegetation, hydrology, and soil. And vegetation, one of those vegetations is subaquatic vegetation. And so if a lake is a shallow, weedy lake and it has 12.4 acres or more of this vegetation, then that will be considered a wetland. There is an invasive species portion to that. We only regulate subaquatic vegetation that is less than 50% invasive species. And so there hasn't been an update exactly how. Like I was saying before, the first step was getting the regulations adopted, and now we are figuring out all the nuances of that, exactly how we are going to do it. I can tell you one thing I didn't know before, Carol, that we do know now is we're going to look at a feet of 60, or sorry, we're looking at 6 feet deep. So anything more than 6 feet, we won't regulate. Does that answer a little bit more?
It
I know
does.
it's like bit by bit of information that we're getting, and
Thank you.
you're welcome.
We've had another question in the chat. So,
Okay, I see from Allison.
mhm.
Okay, so
Need to incorporate a review of criteria for wetlands of unusual importance into our wetland delineation reports for DEC review, or will some of these criteria be reviewed on DEC's end?
okay. No, we will be, because there's things in the wetlands of unusual importance that are so like specific, like the I don't have the list in front of them, but we will review the list. And then if there's any discrepancies, if you think that we don't agree with that, then that's where you would come back, and then we could do a little back and forth. But we will be because it's based on our layers of the mapping that we're creating. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Can trees be cut for electric lines to be installed by either a directional drill or overhead and avoid requiring a permit? So it depends on the scope of the project and the class of the wetland itself. So if it's like a class, so wetlands, and I didn't say this in the presentation, but we classify wetlands 1 through 4, 1 being the most restricted permitting process and 4 being the least restrictive. So that's why I say it depends on the classification and the scope of the project. How big, how many trees? And what I can
10
do,
to 14
Melissa.
acres.
Yeah, and the 12.4 acres. So like it.
Okay.
But then, so that's the initial, but then you have to look at the parcel, and we do have to give you a jurisdictional determination on that parcel, even if it's less than 12.4 acres, because if it has one of the 10 criteria on it. And so the jurisdiction will not only give you, if it's a jurisdictional wetland, but we will also tell you what class the wetland is. Does that answer your question, Jacob?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Lake shoreline is shallow and contains milfoil. Any changes on how a harvester can be used to manage the milfoil for seasonal water enjoyment? Good question, Celeste. We have never regulated, or regulated activity hasn't been a harvester before. But now it will if it's considered a wetland. But we are looking at creating a general permit. We're actually going out, there's a general permit meeting that we are doing with Chautauqua Lake at the end of this month to gain ideas of what activities that they do and the frequency, so that kind of the things they would like to see in the general permit. And one of them is definitely weed harvesting. And we're hoping Chautauqua will be like a model of that JP will give us an idea how we can regulate using this JP with other lakes in the States. So I hope that answered your question, Celeste.
Krista, we posed some questions about wetland restoration, whether or not a jurisdictional permit would be considered for restoration activities or enhancement activities.
Yes.
Is that
So
on the list?
that's not on like an unusual importance list. I have heard questions of that before, and I was talking to Jim from, I can never say his last name, but from the Wetland Trust, and it is noted. It depends on the class of the scope of the project. Even though it's wetland restoration, I know that there's like gray areas, but I'm not the best. I don't have the best knowledge about it, but what I can do is get back to you with a better answer with an email. But I know what most of it, and what my supervisor is going to say, it's mainly about the size of the project and what the activity is.
Oh, and we had another question come in. Will the mapping data developed by Cornell be shared with other agencies or used solely by DEC?
It will be right on the website so everybody can see it.
And so that will mean essentially if we have a site and we look at it and on the website it doesn't show that it's jurisdictional, then
We're the, well, so the wetland mapping, we will show you the SOPs, we'll show you how we get there. You'll see the mapping, but we will be, because there's things like sensitive species, like threatened and endangered species, that only we can know the exact location of that. So it's our program, but you will be able to see exactly how we run it. Does that make sense?
it definitely seems like there's going to be a steep learning curve here.
There, yeah, it's definitely a steep learning curve, but definitely worth it. And I understand there's a lot of fear behind this regulation change because there's so much changing. But if in order to look to what gives myself a piece of ease is just coming back and looking at the bigger picture. And okay, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to save these really important ecosystems that need to be saved. So we're going to have to fumble a bit in the beginning because we're coming from a governmental systemic hatred of wetlands or overall perception. So the government used to pay us to fill in wetlands, to create agriculture, to create housing. And now we're trying to take something that's centuries old and turn it upside on its head and start to really save these ecosystems and undo what's been done. And it's not going to be an easy process.
I did have one other question. It was about, so unusual importance wetlands, there's no limit to the size of how small they can be regulated,
No size to unusual importance. Yeah, limit.
but it's still going to be what is mapped within DEC, because wetlands can be pretty small.
Yeah.
And the mapping limitations will that be
Yeah.
what drives the lower end of what's regulated, or will it be if you're in one of those high flooding watersheds and you have a 10 square foot wetland, are you going to need to approach DEC for a JD for that?
Well, if you're in, yeah, because you have to get the class. So you have to understand what class of a wetland. And we know there's also the issue of these tiny patches of Phragmites, right, that are everywhere. Because another criteria that adds another layer is this urban area criteria. So if it's within an urban area, so there's a lot of tiny patches of Phragmites in urban areas. So that's like, how are we going to regulate? What are we going to deem? Well, that's a wetland that we need to regulate, but that one's not. So yes, there's a lot of room for interpretation. But I'm in the beginning just to get the JD. And again, getting a JD isn't the end all of, oh, I can't do anything. It's just starting the conversation. And I think that's the narrative that needs to be changed, is that just begin the conversation of, is this a wetland or not? And if so, then what can we do? It doesn't mean if there is a jurisdictional determination that it's a wetland, that's the end all be all. But I think that it just brings awareness, a new layer of awareness of the landscape and what can or should be done, right?
Mhm. Okay, we had two other questions. What about setbacks as it relates to shorelines and land use?
Like permit setbacks, like, because it's taking a little bit of a time because of the new regulations. Is that what you're asking?
Celeste, do you want to
I was sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. um, Essentially, whether it's new construction, doing some amendments to the existing structures you have, or even changing the slope profile of a property. These lakes sometimes have slopes near the edge of the water. So how is that falling under this activity?
So it depends. It depends on what's going on the edge of the lake, if that's deemed a wetland or not. and again, like the best answer I have is just if you think that it might be jurisdictional, just contact us and then begin the conversation.
Okay. Under this definition, since you're saying the first 6 feet and if it has vegetation, these smaller lakes all have vegetation within 6 feet. So a very generic definition, I would say a lot of these smaller lakes essentially will be wetlands by that definition.
If it's 12.4 acres or more.
Yes. And these are, I mean, I'm talking our lake is like 125 acres.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So it essentially says what management will we as lakefront owners, the things we need to think about as we move forward with these wetlands, because in a way, a lot of people don't know about these changes. So there's a lot of education to take place. But in addition to that, is what are some of the watch outs that we can start explaining to people that they need to consider as they think about their projects or land improvements or changes?
So that is part of, yes, there is a lot of education. And I think there's another question asking if there's going to be workshops and programs, and there is, and it's also going to be on the website, videos of exactly, you know, landowner use manuals and guides. But like I was saying, the first step was getting these regulations adopted. And now we are figuring out, okay, exactly how we are going to do it. And so that 6 foot, 6 feet deep, I just stated that was just recently in the past week, and it's still, it's still not set in stone. So I would love to be able to give you exactly what to watch out for, and but we're just not there yet. So the best information I can give is just to watch the website, and that is where the most up-to-date information will be. And as it comes in, we give it.
Thank you. This is an improvement. So to get us thinking in the right direction, and I guess we'll look forward to seeing the materials on the website as it changes.
Yeah.
But the best clarification that can be provided to us, then we can help educate the residents of the lakes, so that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the 29th of this month. I'm hoping to get a lot more clarity of what we're doing moving forward in this area. We have, so there will be more to come. And there's in November 12th, there's the invasive species or invasive aquatic plant symposium. I will send Melissa an email because I know they're going to be talking about this as well on there.
I guess we had one more question real quick, if that's okay. If there's an unmapped wetland under the acreage threshold, should we still submit a JD request in case it's a UI?
Yes.
Wetland?
Yes. And I'm sorry that I have to run out and getting pushed out of my room. But I hope this was helpful. I will share the presentation and I will put some more into it that I talked about. And I'll also put in the web link because there's a lot of information on there.
Great, yeah. And we'll put together the video and share it on our YouTube page so we can get out there. And I did want to share about next week's presentation. It'll feature Sam Beck Anderson from Bigger Lakes Prism, and it will be discussing spotted lanternfly threats, implications, and what's being done to address them. Sorry, went a little over today, everybody, and I know there's there's definitely a lot to learn, but thanks so much, Krista. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, you too.